Welcome to Slash Forward. Imagine, if you can, a world gripped by fear and uncertainty wherein the future of humanity potentially revolves around the government's ability to identify and contain an out-of-control viral threat. This one will likely stretch your incredulity to the max. It's a bit surreal, but it's also the general premise of the movie The Crazies, and we'll be looking at the excellent 2010 remake of George Romero's classic. A military plane unexpectedly goes down in the swampy bayous of Ogden Marsh, a small farming community. When residents of the town begin acting strangely, and they manage to rack up as many deaths in 2 days as they had the prior 5 years, the sheriff's investigation leads him down a dark path of governmental cover-ups, involuntary and violent quarantine protocols, and some really gross-looking geezers who seem excessively enthusiastic about inflicting bodily harm on their neighbors. Would you have what it takes to defy the authorities and do what needs to be done to protect you and your family? Also, how awesome would it be to go back to 2010, when this was all just an escapist fantasy? Let me know in the comments below, and feel free to hit the like button if you see any scenes in the video that remind you of your own pandemic journey. Let's get to it. We open just after the ending of Straw Dogs as the fire rages, and pan across to find an entire town afflicted, before flashing back 2 days to much calmer and happier times out on the open plains, as the gentle and well-meaning residents of Ogden Marsh go about their business blissfully unaware. Here, Becca asks her boss, Dr. Dutton, if she can clock out early so she can meet up with her romantic interest, Scotty, at the game, where everyone in town is kicking back and watching the boys smack their balls around. Sheriff David and Deputy Russell are just soaking in the raw talent on display when a problem presents itself in center field. It's crazy Rory up to his old shenanigans again, like wandering into the middle of a junior baseball game with his shotgun. The primary difference in this particular situation is that he means it this time. The sheriff tries to talk him down, but he seems to be in a fugue state that clouds his understanding, forcing the lawman to take the shot. The camera then pulls back to the extreme, showing that this is being observed by a higher power. At the funeral home, the medical examiner confirms it'll be a while before the tox screens come back. David goes out to apologize to the family and try to explain himself. They are rightly concerned about how this will be presented to the public, as while Rory is known for being a drunk, they insist he's been sober for 2 years, and they don't cotton to liars. Later that night, Dr. Judy awakens to find her bed empty, so she passes the nursery in search of her boo, who's outside planing the bejesus out of a wooden plank, trying to expunge the memory of what he done. We then get further implication that Judy is either with baby or that she ate a monster burrito for lunch. The next morning, they try to get back to normal business while inundated with calls from news outlets. Then the ME calls to confirm there were no substances inside Rory, other than the normal substances we all have inside us. In light of this information, David goes to relive the tragic event in his mind and discovers that Ben forgot to go home after the game. So he does. Meanwhile, at the doctor's office, old Bill's been brought in for a checkup due to a similar lackadaisical nature. He shows some signs of neurological issues, so Judy recommends he tag along with her to the big city on Monday for a CT scan. But the timing may be problematic, as that night, under the light of the full moon, Bill is exhibiting some concerning behaviors in the barn. His old lady goes to check on him and finds he's idling in the combine harvester again, so much so that he's not even in it. Her mother's intuition urgently draws her back to the house, frantically searching for Nicholas. When she finds him, he confirms that Dad's in the house and he's brandishing a knife. They try to lay low in a hall closet, but after doing that eye thing, he locks them in to ensure they stay put while he starts fire to the house. And that's all in the face of their protests, because they don't even want to be in there. David gets the call and rushes out to the scene where the fireman reveals that when they arrived, Bill was out casually mowing his lawn. He then begins to whistle a little ditty right in their faces, just to prove he's a madman. The next day in the bayou, a group of hunters find a parachute attached to a waterlogged corpse. While David observes that Bill has the same vacant look on his face that Rory had during his event, the call comes in about the swamp body. They surmise the unfortunate pilot has been marinating for about a week. As the examiner looks for an ID, David wanders off to ponder the potential location of the plane. They remember that old Travis heard a loud crash a few days back, but he's prone to tall tales, so no one gave any mind. They have him him lead the way toward where he thought the sound originated and soon find themselves floating above the plane. This is a fact that does not go unnoticed and warrants the initiation of some sort of containment protocol. On a hunch, David goes to verify the source of the town's drinking water with the town's drinking water expert. He confirms that, as it flows in from the treatment facility, it reaches Rory's home first. This prompts him to rush out to seek authority from the mayor to shut down the water supply. Unfortunately for the public health, it's planting season. The economic impact from this would be devastating, but in the face of several deaths and an unknown danger, he takes matters into his own hands. Back at the station, a bloody handprint leads Russell to discover a nearby bloody hand, which is attached to Bill, who is seeping all over the floor. They carefully move in to check his vitals and he gives them a start. Now really interested in checking the status of their transfer request, the sheriff attempts to make a call, but finds the phone lines dead and the Wi-Fi down. When he goes outside, the town is oddly still, so he follows a faint sound of singing but only finds a woman attempting to recapture her youth, which is not helpful. He then approaches a suspicious black SUV, but it turns out to have just been a casual motorist trying to get his groceries home before the ice cream melts. He then hears breaking glass, giving him his first good lead. He enters the funeral home where he discovers that Jim has been taking creative liberties with the preparation process and also branching out into other areas of interest. He manages to clip open the mouth just in time
Behind you.
to get wanged with a rod. The two men then get into a brawl that concludes with Sonny Jim wishing he had sprung for the cordless tools, and David elated that he didn't, in multiple ways, as he very nearly gets vasectomied, but avoids this thanks to your boy Russell, who's always looking out for his homie's ballsack's back. At home, he tries to convince Judy to take a vacay, but they're interrupted when she sees someone outside, somehow. He ventures out to check the barn, but other than his pinup girl calendar missing, it all looks fine. He then hears Judy scream and rushes out to find he's being rounded up, along with everyone else in town, all of whom are being chauffeured to his central command center. They're unloaded and herded through medical screening tents where tensions run high. Judy assumes they're trying to contain some sort of virus, but answers are not forthcoming. And then Judy is discovered to be running a bit hot, resulting in her getting dragged off without notice. She ends up at the school, which has been reconfigured into a quarantine facility, where the officials are indelicately managing the virus. David wakes up in a truck and learns how the hogs feel before they're unloaded for identification and release. Back at the camp, it's revealed that the fire department has decided to make a move and use their standard issue machine guns to instigate a counterforce. Meanwhile, back with the clean ones, Kevin reveals that they have the entire town sealed off and are shooting on site. Given this, he's managed to make peace with the newfound absence of his wife, but David begins to formulate a plan. He somehow manages to avoid any barricades and infiltrate the police station. He then wastes no time in retrieving his trusty revolver and also finds that Russell escaped in the fence breach fiasco. David insists that Judy is only running hot due to being pregnant, so they lock and load. At quarantine, the officials evacuate due to the breach as the encampment is overrun by the infected. Judy finds herself still strapped down and then notices that she's not too far from Becca.
It's gonna be all right. We're gonna be okay.
But will they? Because a scraping noise reveals the gentleman from the cover art, who wanders in and proves her dead wrong by letting the air out of as many patients as possible. Becca is only spared when the Judester attracts his attention, delaying him long enough for David to arrive. David commands Russell to not get sick, an impossible promise to keep, as they venture back into town to attempt to find a means of escape. But when they find a viable truck, it's owned by a gang of hilljacks who are engaged in hunting humans for sport, trying to scratch that off-season itch. And with all the other vehicles booted, they settle on hoofing it 5 miles to the sheriff's house. Along the way, they argue about whether Judy is actually sick or not, and also agree to detour to Scotty's place so Becca can pick up her +1. Unfortunately, Scotty has seen too much this evening and has to be disarmed by force, and they barely get a chance to reform their union before the cleanup crew rolls in and storms his house, extricating his mother. As a total mama's boy, Scotty can't help but to run to her. Then they're both shot and then the ground is burned and salted. When the barn is searched, they manage to get the drop on the soldier, but show him mercy when it's revealed that he's just a kid. They pump him for info, but the grunts are not in the need-to-know group. He just really wants to get back to his unit, so David imparts their innocence upon him and lets him go in exchange for confirming clearance and leading the men away from their position. A big risk.
We're all clear.
But it all works out. Once they clear out, the gang walks through the night and arrives at the farm by sunup. Embarrassed by the state of things, Judy immediately starts back in on the chores as they lament the fact that the town is dead and never coming back. In the barn, it's verified that the old cruiser is unbooted, and they set to getting her running. Judy fills her overnight bag and stops to take a moment to remember the nursery, while forgetting about the au pair. Sensing something is off, David ventures upstairs and is quickly descended upon by the infected form of Rory's family, who would really prefer that he not retrieve his gun. He's able to use the memory of what he did to distract them as he works the blade deeper so he can use it in a novel way. After he slowly slides it out, he's saved by a shot from Russell, who then comes upstairs to make sure the job is done. This unusual behavior prompts Judy to suggest he may be infected, but now David owes him one. They drive on at the risk of everyone's safety, not knowing what threat to focus on as Becca takes to coughing and Russell seems to struggle with simple concepts. Plus, they're buzzed by a battlecopter. They lose it by dipping into the car wash. As they try to figure out where they're supposed to go next, someone puts the quarters in, resulting in what appears to be their worst nightmare. Russell tries to tip the crew, but it's just not enough in these trying times, you know? In the process of escaping, Becca gets rubber hosed, which seems to result in a broken neck and an instant death, leaving us to wonder if there is any end to our suffering. Once they're all cried out, they head down the road scavenging for whatever they can find. Then an SUV approaches, and as David confronts them with the intent to commandeer, Russell approaches intent on revenge. Upon questioning, the lone survivor comes right out and acknowledges the plane was carrying the Trixie Virus, an engineered bioweapon, but he swears it was on its way to the incinerator. He confirms incubation takes 48 hours, and since it's now day 3, they assume they're in the clear. Unfortunately, any remaining information gets blasted out of his head, leaving them to guess the answers to any other questions they had. With this most recent act of unhinged violence, they try to calmly relieve Russell of his rifle, severely hurting his feelings and leaving their relationship in tatters. Without any real options, they then continue wandering, being sure to keep to the road. After a while, David decides to go for broke and approaches Russell under the auspices of wanting to just have a chat. Mouth to mouth if possible. But when the gun drops, he springs into action. Russell realizes that he ain't right in the head and pleads with them to allow him to walk along in their company a little longer. This works out well as after nightfall their path is blocked by another command post, and Russell offers himself up as a distraction to cover their escape. He pulls up and it works. They tunnel hard on plugging him, allowing the others to jog down the road to the truck stop, which is now completely deserted. David scopes the place and finds a possible means of continued escape, and then returns to find Judy has located evidence of a mass slaughter in the form of an abundance of spent shells as well as a tangled mass of charred bodies. Now recognizing that the soldiers are actually killing everyone, sick or not, they're not sure how to proceed. Ultimately, they decide to make a run for it and go down in a blaze of glory if necessary. As they prepare, Judy attracts the attention of a curious new friend. David hears a radio call for some sort of countdown, and then the lights cut out. Judy knifes up and finds herself running from the Bayou Boys, who have racked up an impressive body count and are now hoping to add her to their collection. Luckily, she's able to nestle in amidst some dead guys and avoid detection. David meets up with her here, and then they run for the truck. They have a moment to relax as David tests his collection of keys, but none of them work. He hops out of the cab to check the driver and then gets pulled under for a surprise lube job. Topside, they close in, but Judy handles her business. While below, David manages to douse his attacker in dirty oil and set him on fire. Very soon, they find themselves blasting down the road, heading towards Cedar Rapids as the countdown drops below 30. Now, all they can really do is drive fast and hope they've gotten far enough as the military employs the nuclear option, threatening to scatter their particulate matter across the universe from whence it came. Despite not having a fridge for protection, they still manage to walk away relatively unscathed and drag their radiation-riddled bodies toward the Emerald City. But then it's revealed that another containment has been initiated. I don't feel like I have a lot to say about the Crazies. It's just a good all-around movie. It's got some suspense, some gore, it's well-paced, and all the pieces fit together. But it doesn't come right out and tell you everything. It's not bogged down by long blocks of exposition to explain where the Trixie Virus came from, how it works, and what they're doing about it. This is all revealed over time as the characters proceed through their story arcs and learn more information as they go. below. Also is Timothy Oliphant, who always puts in a strong performance, as well as a full cast bursting with seasoned character actors. This movie also falls into that fun category of seemingly far-fetched but somewhat believable film premises that, over a long enough period of time, turn into a perfectly reasonable and fully believable plot, in that the events depicted are, to some degree, happening as current events. I think I said fun earlier, but I may have meant depressing or demoralizing. But I guess that's dependent on the individual. It just goes to show how poignant and universal Romero's earlier work was. Do you think this movie or its original was overlooked? And what film do you hold as Romero's most impactful? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. And before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors, memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks uncensored movie reviews of Life Force, Under the Skin, and Possessor, with others to be added over time. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.